Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to talk about something we love, that, of course, being film. We see movies like it's our job sometimes, but it's never a job when it's something that you love, right? Isn't that what they say?
Right,
You don't
right.
work a day in your life if you love your movies or something. I don't know. Anyway, we're back at you this week. We're going to be talking not one, but two movies. We'll be discussing Shazam, the newest outing from DC. We'll also be talking about Pet Sematary, which was recently playing at South by Southwest and has gone wide and is available for you to see right now. Both films, you may have already seen them, maybe you only saw one, maybe you've seen neither. We're going to tell you a little bit about our thoughts on these movies, spoiler free. In case that information is helpful to you before we go into spoiler territory. If you've seen these films, we'd love to hear your thoughts on them. Definitely feel free to hop into that live chat, say hello, hang out with us during the show. Before we get to all that goodness, though, let me introduce my wonderful co-hosts, who probably need no introduction at this point, to be honest. Jim's laughing. I have no idea why, but Jim Poliavigo is here with us. Hey, babe, how's it
I
going?
think if people, first of all, hi, Babe, and hi, Will. Um, Good to see you guys back on the live show again. But I think if people knew what we were going through the last few weeks, they'd be laughing too. Um, Even though it's been it's been a struggle, but I'm glad we're here. Happy to be seeing you guys as we talk this week.
Definitely. Yeah, last week we had some crazy technical troubles with YouTube Live, and even the week before. We ended up recording last week over Skype, which we haven't fucking used in years.
Dusted
But
that off. Yeah.
right? But thank goodness it was there as a backup. We're still having issues with YouTube, but YouTube, hopefully, things get better for you, whatever's going on. And fingers crossed.
We hope you
Things
get better soon. Thoughts and prayers to YouTube.
Deliver that truckload of thoughts and prayers to YouTube. Will Winters is with us here too. Welcome, Will. How's it going?
Yeah, good. I mean, it's like if you gotta laugh to keep from crying type thing. And oh boy, this has been a trio of weeks that would kind of get us there with all the tech issues. But we're having fun. We got some fun movies to talk about today. This is where we want to be. This is what we want to be doing. Tech issues be damned.
Indeed. Although I can't remember the last time I literally spent 10 hours researching a technical problem on the internet and getting nowhere. I'm a pretty techie guy. Will, you're a super techie guy.
It's not like we're like slouches about this sort of thing, and we've put in a lot of time like looking at forums and looking at things, and this seems to be just an issue that we're not finding recreated. And the other people on these like message boards, I posted something to Reddit and got like absolutely no bites today. Like weird. So I don't know.
We're here. It seems to be working for now. I guess that's the important part. I want to give a shout out.
We're going to do our thing, right?
We are going to do our thing. Yeah, we're still going to.
Regardless of all this bullshit, we're going to do our thing.
Indeed. Hey, just want to say a couple of quick highs to some folks who are with us in the live chat. Big Tom is here. Now, Big Tom, unfortunately, his work schedule changed, and Tom hasn't been able to hang out with us the last several weeks. So, Tom, it is a delight to see you here with us. I don't know if your schedule changed again or if you called in sick for the podcast or whatever, but glad you're here. Welcome back. Jordan Riley is listening from the gym. Jordan, that is dedication both to the show and your bod, my friend. So kudos.
He's listening to Jim at the gym.
That's right.
Oh, how meta. And Bobby Miller is here too. Hey, Bobby, good to see you. Welcome. Definitely, folks, if you are listening live, be sure to hop into that live chat. Say hello. Share your thoughts as long as they're YouTube appropriate. We may share them on air. If they're not YouTube appropriate, you can just inbox us at cast@moviebears.com. That's totally fine.
We've also got a side hustle going on right now. If you are like Big Tom and you are calling, I'm assuming you're calling in sick to work and all that. If you need us to sign your doctor's notes for you, we'll totally do that for you.
Yes,
just
yes,
for
we
real,
will.
completely. Like, it's not going to get us into any legal trouble. It's not sketchy at all. Like, it's cool. Just like let us forge. Actually, no, we're going into forgery now, guys. That's where the money's at. No, Brett's like, no.
Yeah.
I mean, you might want to be a little bit careful. I mean, I may or may not have a hard drive from when I was in high school that has a doctor's note I made in Microsoft Word on it. Maybe we could use that for you, Tom. I don't know. But I never used that in high school. It was proof of concept only.
Proof of concept. If I were to play hooky, this is how I would do it.
Right.
But I did not. I promise you. And no, I don't know why my breath smells like beer.
I did not. I did not play hooky. Oh, hi, Mark. Speaking of Ohio's, Rustomeyer is in the chat with us. I think maybe that's pronounced Rustomeyer.
Is that a new name?
I don't know. I have not encountered it before. I don't know this person's real name, but hey,
welcome.
Welcome.
Howdy.
Here with us.
Right.
All right. So we got a big show. We got a lot to talk about. Jim, Will, are we ready to dive in?
I think so.
Yeah.
Let's go
right.
while the internet gods are in our court.
All right, so we're going to talk about Shazam first, and we'll protect you from spoilers for probably the first 10 or 15 minutes. And then at that point, we'll give you fair warning before we go into spoiler territory. So if you're not sure if you want to see Shazam or not, we'll give you some thoughts on whether we think it's worth seeing in theaters, renting, skipping. As always, though, you make your own decisions. Don't let anyone talk you into something you don't want to do. And it apparently is Bruce from Cinema Addicts. Hey, Bruce, welcome.
Hey, Bruce.
Good to put a avatar
Bruce.
picture with a screen name. Glad to see you. Welcome, Bruce. All right, folks, here we go. Our discussion of Shazam. All right, Will, as our resident comic expert, I dabble, I dip my toes, but I bow at the altar of your comic knowledge and experience. How fitting that you should be the one to kick this film off. Give us the brief setup, if you will, and just some thoughts. Is this worth seeing, skipping? What did you think?
Yeah, so I'm going to start us off with the IMDb description because why not? So Shazam. We all have a superhero inside us. It just takes a bit of magic to bring it out. In Billy Batson's case, by shouting out one word, Shazam! This streetwise 14-year-old foster kid can turn into the grown-up superhero, Shazam. So this is the latest DC movie, and it's interesting that Shazam has a film at all, especially now. This is a character who, comic book backstory-wise, like, at one point, this dude was more popular amongst audiences and comic book readers than even Superman or Batman was back in the old school days of comics, like the 40s and such. To the point where Shazam or Captain Marvel or any of the different iterations that he's gone by at the time, he was an inspiration to kind of what we see as modern day comics. He was also an inspiration to even people like Elvis Presley. He wore those jumpsuits because he was a huge fan of the way these costumes looked on Captain Marvel Jr., who was a super popular character for kids at the time. So it's amazing that this character sort of fallen to the wayside, and it's now seeing a revitalization now in this weird second age of DC movies where they've been sort of pulling away from the cinematic universes and just focusing on let's tell a story, let's tell a movie, whatever. And to its credit, I think this is probably my favorite DC movie to date. I'll lead with that. I think that, we've had a lot of pretty bad ones, and I won't resurrect those corpses. I'll leave those dead. But we've had a few recent ones that have had promise. I thought Wonder Woman was 2/3 of an amazing movie with a pretty weak last third. And I think Aquaman was messy, but at least it was fun, so there was something going there. But Shazam is the first of the movies that I think fully realizes what it is, leans into it very heavily, and delivers a solid product as a result. It's not perfect. This movie has some script issues. It has some pacing issues. The biggest thing I think it has a villain issue, which we see sometimes with these superhero movies. But what it does most effectively is, instead of just being a straight up superhero movie, this is a YA adventure story, a young adult adventure story. Think like Hunger Games, or the Percy Jackson and the Olympians, or Maze Runner, or Harry Potter, any of those types of stories that focus on a bunch of kids exploring this hyper magical or hyper fantastic world, and the adventure that ensues. That's what Shazam is. And I think it does an okay job of that. In fact, it does a pretty darn good job of it. I had fun with this. I had a lot of fun with this. I enjoyed these characters. I thought the lead actor, Zachary Levi, whatever, I think he did a really good job. All the different kids that run around in this, I think they all did a really good job. I don't know. I had fun with Shazam, despite myself. I was not expecting to have fun with this one. The trailers didn't do a ton for me, but yeah, this is a recommend for me, surprisingly.
Yeah. So before we go any further, I feel like we need to address, I'd say the pink elephant in the room, but Dumbo was last week.
No.
You referenced Captain Marvel a few times, Will, and I'm familiar, but Jim, I don't know if you are, and certainly I'm not sure, about our listeners' knowledge level. Will, when you say Captain Marvel, people are apt to probably think of Brie Larson in the Marvel film. Why are you saying Captain Marvel here?
So there's been a long history of the name Captain Marvel across Marvel, DC, and Fawcett Comics, where this character originated. He was he at one point was Captain Marvel, and Captain Marvel Jr. was his sidekick, and that was in Fawcett Comics, which was absorbed by DC Comics. And then that character went out of vogue after a while, and then Marvel thought, well, hey, we should have that name because we're Marvel, right? So even now, this character was Captain Marvel for such a long time. It wasn't until sort of like in the 80s, 90s, the comic came back, and he was still called Captain Marvel, but the comic was called Shazam, so it was pretty nebulous. And it wasn't until the 2011 reboot where they just said, we're just going to call the character Shazam. We're going to call the comic Shazam. We're just going to distance ourselves from Captain Marvel entirely, which was around the same time that the Carol Danvers Captain Marvel character started to regain popularity over on the Marvel side. So good timing for those two to sort of take their appropriate mantles and get pushed forward, both in the comic world and in their modern cinematic worlds.
So it was DC. It was a DC property when they changed the name to Shazam.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It was. Okay. And then Marvel decided to launch their own totally different Captain Marvel, I guess, right? With the Carol Danvers story.
And even before that, Marvel's had a Captain Marvel character going back to the Jim Starlin as a comic creator, from decades ago. And so there were at times Captain Marvel's running in both universes. It's just been sort of since 2011 where they both said, look, we're going to be Shazam. You're going to be Captain Marvel, and let's just make the break as clean as possible.
Okay, well, that is rather confusing. I'm glad I went into it not having to think about all that stuff, because I just kind of enjoyed it as a surface level, non-Avengers, non-Marvel, MCU, superhero origin, which when you're ready, I'll launch into my
do it. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Which I actually enjoyed. I really kind of enjoyed this movie. And it's hit or miss for me with these movies, but this one I mostly enjoyed, Will. I think I'm kind of in the same camp as you are. I don't know if it's my favorite DC superhero movie to date, because I really did, even though, like you said, it was messy, Aquaman was a lot of fun for me. I liked its messiness, its kind of unruliness. It didn't bore me. It was like bonkers, crazy enough to really interest me. This one was also fun, and of course, I did like Wonder Woman. So, yeah, maybe DC is righting the ship. Maybe they're kind of honing in on their formula instead of trying to follow in Marvel's wake. They're kind of making their own thing, and I think that's good. I don't, who knows if anything will ever come along that's going to be as big as this Avengers MCU thing. But yeah, maybe they'll carve their niche. Like I said, there's a lot to like about this movie. Will, you mentioned a villain problem, and I can't wait till we get into spoilers. We can talk about that because I want to know if you had the same villain issue that I had. We may have two different villain issues in this review. I liked the superhero. I really liked the family dynamic in this movie. I liked the way it presented this unconventional family that Billy Batson is a part of. Let's just say, without getting too much into spoilers. And I like the way that was treated. Not that they gave every single family member, a lot to do and they became a main character. That wasn't the issue for me. It's just they all had, they were all clearly defined. They weren't really pushed into a corner and they played into the story, which I really liked. So yeah, I would recommend this movie. I'd recommend people go see this movie. It is a lot of fun. It kind of, I was kind of hoping at the beginning, like, oh, this looks like Deadpool light to me, like, with the quippiness and the kind of, jokiness. Of course, we've got what we've got here, and I don't know, it's not a spoiler, right, if it's in the trailer, but we've basically got a teen boy persona in a superhero body, right? In a superhero physical manifestation. So you have that kind of, fish out of water or whatever the word is for that character being kind of in an awkward place. I mean, being a teenager is awkward enough as it is, but being a teenager with superpowers is got to be really strange. And I thought the movie really leaned into that really well, and it was entertaining for me. So yeah, this is a big recommend for me.
Wow, you guys are both super positive about this movie. That's potentially a little problematic because I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to be really positive too.
You better be.
I really liked this movie a lot. And, coming off the heels of Aquaman, I really liked Aquaman a lot. I really liked Wonder Woman a lot. So these individual like superhero story films from DC, for me at least, are just getting way better. There's not that like dark, grainy, Zack Snydery, like no joy in the world feel to these films. And even Wonder Woman, which did have some darkness and grit to it, had sort of some moments of levity and lightness and buoyancy. So I feel like, anytime you have a movie about a superhero who comes to be because of magic, there's got to be some level of that fun to it. Right. And this movie certainly delivers on that. Jim, I agree with you. The marketing for this movie had me pulling my hair out because it was just one joke from the film after another. I think the trailers pretty much just had all the jokes from the movie and that was it. And this movie's so much more than that. So I was very, very happy to see that this movie had a ton of heart. It had a lot of great action. I got to give some props to the mix of like practical effects and CGI. There's certain parts where Shazam like is lifting off the ground and trying to fly, for instance. And like if you look at some of the like even this is so confusing, but like Captain Marvel, right? The Marvel film, like she takes off into the air and it's very obvious like CGI, right? She doesn't like slowly launch. She's just like poof, like right up in an instant. And a lot of times, movies and TV that have people who fly will do that with CGI and make it super quick like that because they don't have to like use maybe a harness or something to lift them up or whatever. But it just makes it look very fake and unbelievable. And I realize I'm talking about a superhero movie and why am I bringing in realism, but whatever. But I don't know. I just liked some of the attention that was given. And I feel like a lot of the effects were better than the Captain Marvel movie. We got to get a better way of referencing that, guys. But yeah, I was really happy with this. I think there's a lot we can talk about in spoilers, so I don't want to delay us getting there too much. But I would say, for anyone who's maybe on the fence about seeing Shazam, this is worth it to me. I would say definitely go see this one, even if you've been sick of all the other DC movies. This might turn things around a little bit for you. So.
It's a very scrappy movie. I think that, like, for me, when I compare like the special effects, like, I don't know that it's necessarily as good, the effects, for me personally, but I think that the story of this film is about like these sort of scrappy characters kind of coming together, and you can tell that the budget was maybe not quite as prevalent with this film as with some of the others. And so the fact that it felt scrappy and looked scrappy and reflected scrappy characters, like, I think that the fact that the effects looked, at least to me, a little rougher around the edges actually gave it some positive charm, if that makes sense. Like, it worked in the film's credit.
Yeah, I agree with you, Will. I think, like I said, it felt like it was trying to do a lot with practical effects, and I don't know if those really were practical effects or just really good CGI that made it look like some practical effects. But it was, I agree, Will. It had a unique feel. It didn't look as polished. Let's put it that way. Like super polished, where you look at it and say, oh well, I can obviously tell that's something that they worked, days or weeks on to make look really, really whiz bang. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I really liked that. I also liked what this movie had was I liked the central relationship of the movie between the Shazam character, or Billy, and his friend there. I forget, what was his name. What was it? Freddie. Freddie, yeah, Freddie and Billy. I liked the relationship they had, both, mostly as Billy as Shazam, and Freddie, because Billy had this identity crisis going on. Like, is he Billy Batson, the orphan, teenage kid who's trying to find his way, or is he, the Shazam character trying to figure out what he's going to do in this super powered body? So I really thought that was really sweet, and there was a lot of heart in that relationship, and I thought they played it really well.
Yeah, and this is a big win, not just for like superhero movies. I don't know that they necessarily need any wins or whatever, but what it is a win for is the kind of the mid-sized superhero movie, because when you compare this to other DC movies, you're talking like 300 million plus production budgets, and that's like when you think about things like Justice League or Dawn of Justice. Each one of those sort of started at the 300 range, and then once you added in marketing and all of those reshoots and re-edits and stuff like that, like, you're talking like hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, whereas the production cost for this one came right in under $100 million, which is almost unheard of, because
that's impressive.
Yeah, you generally think about like, oh, this is a small size superhero movie, a la like Super or something like that, or a big budget one. But really, in this mid-sized tier, you're talking this and like the first Deadpool. And what both of those movies I think did very well is, because they had to be creative with their use of budget, it forced the filmmakers to try something new and something different. It reminds me of an interview with M. Night Shyamalan that I got to see, where he said the worst thing that ever happened to me as a filmmaker was when they started giving me money, because I was a better filmmaker when I had to like, when I had no budget and I had to like sort of think around the edges instead of just being allowed to do whatever I wanted. That shows here. It's the scrappy, creative, out of the box thinking that made this film, I guess, just so vibrant.
Yeah, looks like every dollar. I mean, it looks like they got most of those dollars onto the screen, and it, like I said, it looked really good. There were a lot of action set pieces in here, that required dollars to get done, and I thought it was really good.
Indeed. Well, looks like Brian Cortez just joined the chat. Hey, Brian. He says, I just saw Shazam today. It was lit. Brian, was it lit because of all the lightning bolts or because it was good?
Yeah.
I'm going to assume both. How about that? But welcome. Glad to have you with us. Folks, how do we feel about spoilers at this point? Is this a logical place?
It's time.
Yeah, let's go in and get some spoilerage on.
Shazam!
Shazam!
So, for those who have not yet seen Shazam, by the way, we're saying it like that because it's the fucking title of the movie. You literally have to. It has an exclamation point in the title. We have to say it just like that. If you have not yet seen Shazam and you value your virginal innocence where this film is concerned, if you're watching live, this is your cue to step away for maybe 15 minutes or so, and then come on back for our discussion of Pet Sematary. If you're listening to the digital magic of iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher tape delay, feel free to use the time index in the show notes. Skip ahead as is appropriate. I'm done rambling. Spoilers are officially fair game. Guys, I want you to do something for me. Are you ready?
I'll try.
Yeah, what do we do? I know what you're going to say. Do it.
I want you to put your hands on my staff and say my name.
Say it!
Yes, sir.
Good boy. Was that a little weird to have an adult saying that line to a child in this movie?
It wasn't.
I gotta believe that somebody must have noticed this in script writes, script checks, read-throughs, and the rehearsals, and then finally the shoot. Somebody had to maybe people were too afraid to say anything, but it was kind of weird.
Yeah, they lampshaded it. That's the thing. Like, I think when you have a thing that sounds that could be construed as inappropriate, I think if you lampshade it, it adds some humor to the situation as opposed to it being something super cringeworthy. They had a line where, like, when he said, "Put your hand on the staff," and I forget what Billy says.
I think he said gross.
He said, really?
Gross or what? Yeah.
Gross.
Yeah. So he and they basically draw attention to it enough to where it's kind of like, okay, they're in on the joke too. I want to talk about. I guess I have two.
The hot foster dad.
Well, that too. Gosh, yes. No, I have two items, but I guess the major one is just one Jim and I kind of both hinted at is that I think we both had villain issues of some type.
I did.
For me, it was just that this felt like a Phase 1 Marvel villain to me, and that his motivations were on the table, which is fine. It's not like he was just like a completely awfully written villain. It's just that he was very one-dimensional in terms of like his wants and his needs, and the way they manifested through his evil plan, which is just, I want to be powerful and destroy everything. You know, there's so much wonderful stuff happening with the family and with the hero and his friendship and just all of that stuff that it almost didn't need to be bogged down by a super complex villain. But at the same time, like, it felt like the stakes of that final conflict were a little less engaging than they might have been with a stronger villain.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a problem for me. I actually kind of liked Mark Strong's performance as the villain.
Oh, yeah.
In this movie, I thought he was really good. I thought, I always like to see him show up. And he portrayed the villain really well. And as far as his motivations go, yeah, in these movies, I mean, it's forgettable. I don't even really remember what his fucking motivation. I guess he was just pissed because there was another magic person who had more powers than him or was going to be stronger than him, and he had to stop him.
What it was is he was initially picked by the wizard Shazam as a kid to take on his powers, right? But then he was tempted by the dark side. And so Shazam was like, no powers for you, go away. And then he found out, he spent his whole life trying to get back there, and then da-da-da-da-da.
Essentially, like, and I think he even says the line something to the effect of, how dare anyone tell me I'm not good enough? I'm definitely good enough. In fact, I'm just going to show you how good enough I am by big evil plan.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And so that was, I see that. But my villain problem was at the I thought it was cool to have like the seven deadly sins.
7 deadly sins.
But But then when it got to the movie's climax, I thought there was too much going on. It felt like we had to fight through fucking 8 battles in order to get through that climax. And I was a little tired of watching kids fight CGI rock monsters, by the end of that. So it was just a little. The climax was fine. Every movie like this has one, but it was just a little too drawn out for me, I guess.
And that's part of my issue too. Like, especially with this being the first movie, and I said up front, I really like this movie a ton, but I will agree. Sort of that last act. I mean, I love the Captain Marvel family. I'm a huge Mary Marvel fan, but like, it got pretty convoluted and bloated, right? Having all of the other foster kids now get their Shazam powers, and now they're flying around and they're part of the battle. And I mean, it's kind of fun to see that because I like that stuff. But like, I think I would have enjoyed seeing the main character like be the main hero and save the day before we bring everybody else in to that degree. Will, you have a dark look on your face. You may disagree. What do you?
No, not dark look. I don't know if I disagree. I think that, and this was actually the other point that I wanted to make, so it actually lines up pretty closely. I think that if anyone is very interested in this character, because I think there's probably a lot of people who are like, I watched this movie about the weird lightning guy, and now I kind of want to read these comic books. I think there's probably a lot of people who don't have the same like history of like Batman or Superman or Captain America or something like that, who may want to check out this character in the comic books. But as I just mentioned, he's got 80, 90 years of history at this point, and so it can be a little intimidating on where to dive in. But this movie draws its story very, very, very closely from the 2011 relaunch. So you don't have to go back far. You can look back to that story, because what they did and what they did here in the movie was, there's been a lot of different people to carry the mantle. There was this character named Captain Marvel Jr. in like the 40s who was like wildly popular with the kids. He's part of the reason we have like Teen Titans and things like that today. That character was a character named Freddy. So that's where they got that character from. And then, of course, like you mentioned, Mary Marvel. With the 2011 relaunch, they decided, instead of having all these people as storied parts of the history, they're all just foster kids together. And then they introduced some new ones and such.
And then they're Power Rangers.
And then they in a way, they kind of draw on like kind of the history of like kid heroes like Power Pack or anything like that. That are popular amongst kids. And I think that's why I think that this is a good, I mentioned it in the pre-spoiler section, this is a very good YA style story, because when you think about Harry Potter, or when you think about Percy Jackson, the Olympians, or any of those types of stories, you always have the one specialist child, like the Harry Potter, like, oh, I got struck by, I have the lightning. Hey, he has lightning too. But what works so well about YA is they always have a cast of like really interesting friends who
very types of personalities and stuff like that,
and tied to whatever like power source they are. So like, oh, they're all wizards, or this one is part satyr, and this one's part ghost, and this one's a werechild, or whatever story you happen to be watching. All of them have like their own little special uniqueness thing. So it actually didn't bother me as much thinking about it from that lens, because it's part of the YA genre. And so seeing all those other kids get involved didn't bother me as much as I think maybe it would have otherwise. I do agree, though, that they kept cutting back to it. I think you could have trimmed a good 5 minutes out of that final fight scene just fine.
Yeah, a little bit.
Because some of the, like, oh, now it's showing back to Mary still struggling with that thing. Like, okay, I get it. She's having a problem fighting this. They could have tightened up the action beats.
But we knew where it's going, right? I mean, we know it's where it's going. So to bring us through it like 6 or 7 times just seemed a little bit redundant. And that's maybe a nit. I had to sit through that, battle. The other thing that, and again, I did like this movie a lot, but the other thing that I kind of scratched my head at, and unfortunately it was at the beginning, so it took me out a little bit of the story right from the get-go. It's when Billy he gets separated from his mom at the beginning of the movie as a little boy. And apparently you know, his mom never goes back for him. Like, it seemed like a very, very, I don't know how to say this, like a sudden shift, because she seemed like a great mom, and then all of a sudden he's lost, and like, oh no, they'll find his mother. They don't find his mother. Like, police have no way of like finding this person. Like, I mean, they both had the same last name. It didn't seem like they were in a huge city. I don't know. It just seemed a little weird. And I was thinking, like, why wouldn't the mother, you know, come back for him and whatever? And they do touch on it later in the movie. They do visit her, but it's almost like, okay, they visit her. He finds her. She says, well, I was just 17. And he's like, okay, see you later. And then there's nothing to that. It's just, it was very strange.
Well,
the way they set that up.
And the weirder part is, like, you know, flashback, we see her standing there looking at the kid and the cop, right? And she's like clearly in plain view. There's nobody in front of her. Like, you're telling me the little kid who's like, you know, lost his mom isn't like looking around and gonna see her. And, you know, that was a little weird. I totally agree with you.
They could have definitely shot and framed that a little different. I had less of an issue with the mother, like the fact that he kind of got over the mother issue so much when confronting her, because
right.
What worked so well for me about that is this is a movie about, I mean, we've seen this theme in like 1,000 movies before, but it's, you know, the family you choose or that chooses you is more important than the family that you're born into. And I think what's so special about this one, someone asked me this on Facebook, and I struggled to come up with a good answer to it. The question was, when was the last time you saw a purely positive example of a foster home in a movie? And I couldn't think of one. And I think that if you were if you are someone who has gone through the foster system and you think about media, that's got to be terrifying to think about, like, I'm going to be abused or forgotten or like starved or whatever it is that all those kids and all those movies I've watched. This is an amazing movie for kids who are going through that, to realize that they may be able to find that sense of family that they're longing for so much. So I loved that. I loved that. So much. And I loved that Billy came, you know, he rejected it so much through so much of this movie. And it wasn't until he really saw what it was that he had to fight for, versus what it was that he's wanted all this time, which is that relationship with his mother, when he realized, like, oh, hey, this wasn't what I needed. What I needed was what I had all along. It's simplistic, but I think it's effective.
Yeah, I agree, but I think we're overlooking the more fundamental message of this film, Will, and I'm a little bummed that you didn't grasp it. I mean, obviously, the message of this movie is stand up for your family, and some old dried out wizard will give you his powers. I think that's the message.
It's true, because I remember when I was a kid and I stood up for my family, I now have thunder powers. It's crazy.
You were pure of heart.
Oh goodness. Oh boy.
You know what's weird is, like, those lightning powers haven't actually manifested yet, but I grabbed that wizard staff.
Lightning from my hands.
I know I did.
Lightning from my hands.
Huh.
I mean, I grabbed a wizard staff one time, but I don't think I got powers from it.
Yeah. Brad, that was at a bear run.
Oh, is that what that was? I thought that was a superhero lair. I mean, it was so dark, and anyway.
Lair punchy.
Anyway, just one more thing about the.
Yeah.
One thing I liked about the foster family specifically, and that situation, Will, you're right, but it also showed that a foster family situation doesn't have to be perfect to work. Like, their house wasn't like immaculate, and it wasn't like there wasn't any issues, you know, with the family. I mean, everybody had their issues, but they still all came together and functioned as a family, as a loving family unit. So I think that was a really positive representation of foster families, foster kids, and parents. So good on the movie for that.
I will say one of my disappointments with this film, and I think this comes from reading some of the Shazam comics, is the transformation effect. Basically, he says Shazam, and there's just a puff of smoke. But like in the comics and stuff, when he says Shazam, like there's all this lightning hitting him and like shooting out from his body, and obviously they had a smaller budget than
They
like
needed
a
another
Superman or a
20
Batman
million
movie.
for that, babe. Another 20 million, another 20 million, and you might have got that.
But if they could have just done like one, like maybe, I don't know, like the very first time he does it or something, I don't know, it would have been cool to see. But I'll tell you, these things that we're like calling out as problems seem pretty small in the big scheme of things. You know what I mean? I think about our discussion of like, you know, Man of Steel or Batman v Superman and how we were like flipping tables and throwing shit. DC,
Justice League, Suicide Squad.
God,
my heart is on. I guess we are digging up those corpses.
Yeah. You know, so DC, good on you. You know, for kind of upping your game a little bit, maybe doing more with less, and bringing out some good films here. What's coming up for DC? We've got a Flash movie coming, right?
I don't even know at this point because they've been resetting
Suicide Squad 2.
I know. I know we've got Joker's the big one we've got.
Was there anything in the Stingers that would have given us a clue?
No, the Stinger was.
There were two.
Yeah, and the second one was just a reference, and the first one, I think, was just being silly, honestly.
That's right. The lunchroom scene, right?
Yeah. And Superman shows up.
I mean, according to so we've got Joker coming out this year, and then that's right. Wonder Woman 84 and Birds of Prey are filming and in production for next year. And then the Suicide Squad rewrite with the redo with James Gunn. No, James Gunn is doing Guardians of the Galaxy guy is writing it. So it's the most optimistic I've ever been for a for a sequel to my worst film of the year.
I was gonna say.
I fucking hated Suicide Squad. Fuck that movie so hard. But I mean, James Gunn is a incredibly creative, competent writer, and he's apparently they're scrapping a whole lot with it. So I'm cautiously optimistic that this wouldn't. I mean, it can't be worse.
I mean, we could have a whole discussion about this, but now I'm wondering if Joaquin Phoenix is going to show up as Joker in future Suicide Squad movies, or is he a different character than the Jared Leto Joker? I don't even know. It's probably not worth getting into.
I think DC at this point is really like, while some of these things exist in the same universe, obviously Aquaman and Wonder Woman exist in the same universe because we've had crossover movies. I think at this point, the last thing that I heard from them is they're saying, look, we want our movies to be more or less self-contained. Like, maybe there's references, maybe there's some like light cameo stuff, but they're really not interested in building a huge cinematic universe right now. And that's smart, because I think that's been their undoing for so many years.
Seems to be. Well, we'll have to see what happens with what comes next. Speaking of what comes next, are you guys ready to talk Pet Sematary?
Yeah, I want to get into this one.
Let's exhume it.
Nice.
We're gonna kill this, and then reanimate it and kill it again.
No, that's Suicide Squad. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and talk Pet Sematary. If you've not yet seen Pet Sematary, totes okay. We're going to talk about it spoiler-free for probably 10 minutes. If it's helpful to hear our perspective on whether we think people should see it, feel free to hang around and listen to that. And then we'll give plenty of warning before we go into spoilers for Pet Sematary. Real quick, though, Big Tom in the chat had mentioned earlier this question of whether or not we could ever like get together at a bear run, guys, and record live. What do you think? Would that be weird? We've never like recorded the show with an audience before.
I mean, if you think about it, we've had a few of those Eggleth brunch, which are more interviews, but we've had a chance to sort of test what it's like to record live while a bunch of things are happening around us. What we haven't done is then have that projected to an active audience, but I do think that we've in some way sort of dipped our toes in the water, yeah, I'd be 100% down for it. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we could do it. I know we could do it. It makes me nervous, but I know we could do it.
Wait,
I'm not a performer. I'm not a performer, but I could,
Guys, do you think we would have any trouble like talking movies with one another?
Yeah, exactly. We could block out the,
but here's the thing: if there's like half-naked guys walking around with hairy chests, I'm gonna have a hard time focusing.
Oh, so you're talking like right in the middle of like a run with like all that. Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, just Brad, we would put those like little blinders that you put on horses. We'd put some of those on.
I'll put my bear blinders on.
I don't even know what those would look like.
I don't know.
Yes, we'll get you some of those. So
they're probably made of leather.
Laser focused on the agenda. Yeah, that's what we do.
All right.
No, I think this would be fun. I think it would be fun. I think we could explore some ideas like having like live audience questions or some sort of element to like make it more than just like us talking about movies in a normal way, some way to incorporate the crowd. Obviously we have to do a lot of offline talking and planning if we were to ever do that.
But, we'd have to come up with some audience participation, like little games or something we could get some input from the audience on. I think that would be really fun.
Even just a Q&A section, just say like ask us like opinions on films, because that's the thing that we get sometimes right now. Like we have people in chat who say, "What did you think of this?" Or, "Oh, I thought that." If we had people come up to the mic and say, "Man, I'm really not into horror movies. What's the horror movie that you think like might be able to change my mind on that?" Or like, "What's the movie you most remember from your childhood?" Like basically giving us little prompts so we could talk about. I'd be down for stuff like that.
If it stays at that though, because sometimes we get people in the chat are like, "I want to suck your dick," and it's like, well, that's probably not suitable. Like
that's not a question, sir. That's a statement, an incredibly flattering statement. But no, that yeah. I mean, we'll have to work around that.
Yeah, we'll have to work through it. All right, guys. Well, it's that time. We are shifted gears, changing things up. Here we go. Our discussion of Pet Sematary. All right, Jim, you are up. Give us the brief setup of this film, and of course, we're keeping things spoiler-free for probably the next 10 minutes or so as we give our initial impressions. What did you think? Is this worth seeing in theaters, waiting for rental, or maybe even skipping? That could be fair as well.
Sure. I'm glad to set this one up. This is, as you mentioned, this one's Pet Sematary. It is based on a Stephen King novel, and it's also kind of the second movie iteration. I think it's just the second movie iteration of this movie. The first one being from 30 years ago, guys, 1989. Like my daughter was born that year, so that's like 30 years ago. And this one's about a daughter. We'll talk about that a little bit. But let me read the IMDb summary of Pet Sematary for those of you who may not be familiar with it before we get into discussion. Dr. Lewis Creed and his wife Rachel relocate from Boston to rural Maine with their 2 young children. The couple soon discover a mysterious burial ground hidden deep in the woods near their new home. So that's the premise of this film. And I have to say that I never did read the novel. I did see the original film, but a long time ago. I did not rewatch it before we saw this movie. So I do love a lot of Stephen King properties and, films that have been made from his novels. I don't remember Pet Sematary making a huge impact on me one way or the other. And so I don't have like a huge soft spot for that movie or anything, or I don't even really remember much about it going into this movie. That being said, Brad and I were smart enough to buy tickets to this movie for a 9:30 a.m. showing of Pet Sematary in the movie theater, which is not typically the way, you might want to get jazzed up for a horror movie. Usually might want to go later in the day or even at night and see it with a big crowd. But to get to it, I actually liked this movie. I liked what this movie did. As horror movies go, I mean, to me, you have kind of the upper echelon of horror movies that do something a little bit extra, or put different spins on horror. Like, I mean, we talked about Us, and we talked about Hereditary, and that kind of horror that has a little something extra. And then we have kind of the like the Conjurings and the Annabelles and those kind of movies. I think this movie kind of sits right there in the middle. I liked what this movie did. It didn't seem to be a big splashy movie. It didn't want to be that. I heard people talk about how it may diverge from the source material a little bit and diverge from the original movie, the 1989 movie, quite a bit. But I will say that I liked the story. I liked how it was done. I liked the creepiness and how they maintained that through the movie. There are a few jump scares in this movie as well, as I think people expect from some kind of mainstream horror movies. But for the most part, I liked it. The cast in this movie, we have Jason Clarke, Amy Seimetz, John Lithgow, and I really want to give a shout out to Jete Lawrence in this movie. She plays the daughter Ellie, and I thought she did a really, really, really good job, especially in the second half of this movie. I thought it was for a horror movie performance from a child. I thought it was really good. I liked Pet Sematary quite a bit. I would recommend that people check it out, whether they have an affinity for the original book or the movie. Check this one out. See how it compares. I did not compare it. I just really liked it.
Babe, it's crazy that you mentioned that this movie's the original movie is 30 years old. As you were talking about it, I was drifting back into my memory palace to the time when I saw that movie, and I was laying in the bed of my dad's truck. We went to a drive-in theater.
Oh boy.
To see that film, and it was like a midnight showing or something of it, and it scared the fucking crap out of me. And then I think I fell asleep like 45 minutes before the end. And then I didn't watch it, again until I was an adult. I think I was in college. I was like 19 or something. And I love the original movie a lot. But I have to say, I kind of like this one better, which is, I don't know, maybe a little weird to say, but remakes typically aren't better than the original film. Without giving anything away, I like how this one ends a whole lot better than the first movie. It does some really cool things. It subverts some expectations you may have coming from the book and the original film. I really dig this movie. I want to give a big shout out to John Lithgow, who's looking pretty daddy berry in this movie, by the way. But also, too, I forget how much I love that man. We see him way less often than I think I would like, or we should.
Good old Judd.
He's got some great acting chops on him, and he had some nice beardage going on this time around. Good to see him show up and have kind of a prominent role in this film. He's got one of those voices. I could listen to him read the phone book, but I don't like him doing comedy, which is weird. That's why I never got in. What was that show? Third Rock from the Sun or something?
Yeah, Third Rock from the Sun.
Yep. 30 Rock from the Sun.
It's
Third Rock now.
30
I always wanted to make that mashup.
Tina Fey just like shows up anyway. But anyways, I think this is totally worth checking out, whether you've seen the original, whether you haven't, whether you've read the book, whether you haven't. This is a great film. It's unfortunately all too rare these days to have good horror films. Mileage can vary, but I really liked a lot of what this movie did. So my recommendation, check it out, and do so like now. Like, go to a movie theater on like a Friday night or a Saturday night when there's a crowd, see it with people, soak up that horror movie energy. Good stuff. Will, what about you?
I think you're very right, Brad, in that mileage does vary, and it varied for me quite a bit on this one. I thought Pet Sematary it's an incredibly competent movie. Like, it does a lot of things competently, but to me, it didn't do enough things well. It didn't do enough. It didn't really nail the things it was going for. First of all, what worked about it? I think that it has some very wonderful atmosphere developing scenes. I think there's some stuff, but it kind of spread throughout the movie, at the beginning, the middle, and all throughout the movie. There's moments that build tension incredibly well. And I think from some standpoints, that's the key ingredient to horror. So I can't knock this film too much. I like that quite a bit. The things that I didn't like, though, stood out for me, and they were hurdles that I couldn't quite clear. I didn't buy Jason Clarke in the lead role. I think that his line delivery for me just was incredibly stilted. It felt like someone doing an impression of Frasier playing the main character, as opposed to someone playing like an educated doctor type character. It felt like such an odd performance. I think John Lithgow was fine in this. I like him in a lot of things. I don't think this was his greatest work, but he showed up. I did quite like Jette Lawrence or whatever. I thought she was probably the standout for me. I think she, as a child actress, had to carry a lot of weight on her shoulders, more so than a lot in a horror movie. And I think that she did a pretty effective job with the stuff that was thrown her way. But yeah, it's just, I felt like the performances just weren't quite what I needed them to be for me to really be sold on this. I think that there were some thematic issues. I think when we talk about the themes of what Pet Sematary is about, and what it is it's about grief, and it's about loss, and it's about, when you cling on and when you let go. And we'll talk more about the specifics of that in spoilers, but that stuff is broad enough I can talk about now. I don't feel like it necessarily carried through with its themes as well as I wanted it to, or as well as it could have. And I'm not saying that as like an apologist for the first film. I saw the first film, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s. Like, I don't know. I didn't see it in theaters. I would have been like 7 at the time. But I saw it early on, and it was a fine movie. It wasn't a great movie. It's not like a standout. It's not something I've had to revisit. Same with the book. It's not like, it's not part of like Stephen King, like the Stephen King books that I have to go back and revisit. It's just fine, But I feel like both of those at least captured the theme in a way that this one didn't quite for me. There's a incredibly underused character here. The character of Victor is kind of, I think, mishandled. Man, I don't know. Like, it's fine. I think people will have a good enough time with this one. I don't want to like knock it too hard. This isn't like worst film of the year or anything like that. No hyperbole. I think if the trailer interested you, I think you're going to have a good enough time with this. But for me, it's one that, like, if someone were to say, do you straight up recommend I go see this? I say maybe, or, maybe yes, but in all lowercase letters. I don't know. Just fair enough. Not excited about this one. And I love horror.
Yeah, I didn't think it would, probably work for everybody. I had been so removed from the original property that this one felt like a pretty good, horror tale, that was well told, I thought. Everything about it wasn't perfect, but there were some, I was significantly creeped out at 10:30 in the morning, and that's pretty good. It did creep me out. I don't know. People have talked about, Will, I don't know if you can speak to it, or Brad, maybe you can. Do you know what the significant deviations were? When we get into spoilers, would you be able to talk that?
I can talk a little bit in spoiler. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because I don't know. I thought the movie, I don't know whether the actress who played the girl played into the strengths of the movie, or the movie played to the strengths of the actress, but it was, how they leaned on that character, I thought was pretty strong, and she really came through, and I was really impressed with her. So I'm going to be maybe watching for her to do more stuff. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'd say this is like I said, I think it's a good Friday night, go to the movies horror movie. I don't think this, it's probably, I liked it better than the Nun, and the last couple of Conjuring movies. Maybe it's just because it had a cool cat in it. I don't know. That could be it. You know, I don't know.
I think there's something to be said for kind of a point that you just hit on there, in that I think when we talk about horror as a broad umbrella of film, I think the most exciting stuff is the stuff that's not happening kind of in the big budget multiplex stuff,
Yeah.
which is disappointing because we are seeing so many of those like Conjuring and Nun or whatever movies that just feel so limp. And so in some ways I will say that this is a breath of fresh air in comparison, because compared to the other, I don't big budget, like the multiplex horror offerings,
Yeah.
this is definitely in the top tier of those. It's just like I when I compare it to The Nun, it's way better. But when I compare it to just the wide breadth of other horror that's out there and available right now, it's hard to be as excited about this.
Yeah, it's certainly no Shining or, you know, even maybe Misery, but it's you know, I'd say it's probably, for me, it's probably mid to high third Stephen King horror.
And it's even a step in the right direction too, because I think that if this is successful, and I haven't looked at the box office numbers, and the next filmmaker were to look at this and say, gee, I want to replicate some of that success, but I want to improve on the formula a little bit, I think that moves the genre, like especially again, like the multiplex stuff, the direction it needs to go. So while I don't think that this was a good final destination, I do think that this has the potential to be an incredibly effective stepping stone. The same way when we saw it in 2017, I think that, and it's another Stephen King one, I think that that's another film that took the bad stuff from the, you know, the big theater offerings, cut that out, and kind of focused on more of the stuff that worked and built tension and built the characters. Right. So yeah, this is a step in the right direction for sure.
And this is a good example of that, the festival goggles thing that we talked about. So we had the opportunity, well, we kind of stumbled into the opportunity to have a chance to go see this movie at South by as the closing night film, but we were just, we didn't go see it because we were just totally zonked out, and we didn't really want to have to squeeze ourselves into the seats at the Paramount again one more time. So we kind of, and we knew it was going to be opening again in a few weeks anyway. So we decided to skip it. But I did have my ear to the ground about, you know, reactions out of South by, and everything I saw coming out of South by was almost completely positive. Like, people were like, oh, this is great, you know, it's a new take on the story, you know, it felt a little fresher, blah 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 blah, and it was really good. And then when the movie was released, or the week it was released, then I started to see kind of a little bit of a, you know, a big swing the other way, like people who didn't really resonate with this film very much. So I just thought it was funny watching that reaction, those two reactions happen. And that put me in a position of like, okay, I'm going to go see this with an open mind and see which side I fall on. And I actually kind of liked it.
Well, good. I'm glad. And yeah, definitely, you know, a cool opportunity to try and see this at South by Southwest. Unfortunately, you know, we just didn't physically get to that screening, but really, really cool just talking to some other folks who did get to see that and, you know, kind of be part of that. Seeing films, especially horror films like this one, as part of a festival crowd can be kind of amazing, right? You're just sucking up all this energy, especially in a venue like Paramount, where you have 1,300 people who are super jazzed to be there. Sometimes that can kind of, you know, influence, right, how you feel about a film. Last year we saw A Quiet Place, and I think it did that to me a little bit to some degree. When I saw A Quiet Place again in movie theaters back in the real world, I still really liked it, but I don't think I was as like high off of the crowd energy, you know what I mean, as I was seeing it at the Paramount as part of South by. And so kind of a similar thing possibly here. I don't know. Will, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's like, it was interesting about this one, or exciting about this one, or from a festival perspective, they did this thing, South by, and I don't know whether it was South by that did this, or if it was the production company or who it was that arranged this, but they had a procession of children in creepy masks proceeding to the theater the lead up to this. And it's those types of things that I think they don't necessarily weigh like, do I like the movie, do I not, or whatever, but they add to sort of the charm and the excitement and the hype. I remember comparable experiences like when we walked out of Chef and the food truck was sitting there, or when we watched any number of they feed us quite a bit at the at South by Southwest. When you have a screening that has something food related, they'll often have something there. We got these tags
related
for the beach bum. They had these like scratch and sniff cards that lined up with different scenes in the movie where he smoked weed, and each one of the scratch and sniffs was just a different strain of weed that you could just like, oh yeah, I want to smell this weed. Yeah. So I mean, I think the idea that they had that procession of the creepy children, like, and it wasn't just children, but it was like in the masks and like the little, it led into that very well. And since that's such an early scene in the movie, and I feel like I'm stepping into spoiler territory, since that's such an early scene in the movie, it's perfectly time to kind of pull us as an audience in through the festival experience into that first scene or that first sequence and get us hyped up for everything.
Yeah, I mean, you really got to hand it to South by. Like, they do a really kick-ass job at sort of catering, right, to their audience. The folks that bring these films, obviously, they want audiences engaged and hyped, and they've got their own hype and marketing people. I think back to when we saw the very first Unfriended movie several years ago, which was not a great movie. But, like, I tweeted the Twitter handle of the Laura Burns or whatever, just thinking nothing would happen, and all of a sudden that Twitter handle is tweeting me death threats back, just like in the movie, and I'm like, oh my god, the killer from the movie is tweeting me. This is amazing.
And didn't that happen like, because we were at the premiere of that, and I seem to remember you following it like right before or right after the movie, and it happened like relatively quickly, like they were on it, so you may have been one of the first people to like legit get Laura Barnes. Like, it's weird that we remember her name, right? Like, I can't remember the name of any of the characters in Pet Sematary, except for Gage. I remember the kid's name.
That's because they didn't tweet you.
Yeah, but I remember Laura Barnes from fucking Unfriended of all things.
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. I want to go ahead and just transition us into spoilers. We've got a little bit of time left, and I think there's a few things we want to talk about. So, if you guys are down, any objections?
No, not at all. I want to talk about, a couple of things I thought the movie did good, and which I can only talk about in spoilers.
Awesome. All right, so let me go ahead and just transition us then. We're going to go ahead and talk spoilers for Pet Sematary. If you haven't seen the film yet, you don't want to be spoiled, now's your chance. Step away, come back in 10 minutes. Skip ahead according to the time index in the show notes if you're listening via iTunes or Spotify. But spoilers are officially fair game. Jim, where'd you want to start?
I want to talk about, like, this movie isn't afraid to show, or at least strongly intimate, the death of children, right? I mean, there's at least one pretty horrific, child death scene in this movie, which, anytime a movie does that and doesn't really flinch away from it without getting too morbid or over the top gross. I give movie props for that because, they don't shy away. We talked about the movie Little Monsters early on another show. And that's another one I give props for those reasons. One thing really stuck out at me was just a really quick scene with the girl. She's already been dead. She's killed. She's been buried behind the pet cemetery, right? And she comes back, of course. She's reanimated, and she's laying in bed, and she's like talking to her mom or her dad, and her eyes are going like in different directions, and like not together, but like one's droopy and one's like, and I'm like, that's either some really great, special effects or she's got some kind of gift for making her eyes look dead, because that was pretty. It was one of those like creepy moments that like, holy shit, like that looks pretty convincing to me. But yeah, I like that too. But as far as the plot goes, let's talk about, what do you think deviated here?
I think there were. I mean, there's a lot of little things, but those don't matter. I think there's two major things. I think one of those two major things doesn't ultimately matter, and one does. The first one is, in this one, the first big change is that it's the daughter that tragically dies instead of the son early on.
I see.
And so when the whole like witch kid gets buried and comes back and eventually ends up kind of cutting tendons and killing people and all that stuff, it's the little kid instead of the girl whose attachment is more through the cat. And but for me, I think I saw some people who are like livid about that, and to me, I don't think that's an issue. I think it's a whatever, like it's just cleaning up the story, and I think in a lot of ways this works a little better. The other big change, and I think the one that I maybe had more of an issue with, and I think probably more so than a lot of people, just based on kind of what I'm seeing in chat and hearing from the two of you, is the way the movie ends. The original, it was the doctor like injects some like lethal injection stuff and kills the cat, and then kills the kid, and the wife is still just straight up dead from being killed by the kid. And so he, in his mind, is like, no, she just died. I can save her. I can bring her back. This time I can fix her. And when he brings her back, like, it's then assumed that she kills him, afterwards. And so it basically plays into that whole thing of like, I think there's more of a theme of hubris there. Like, he keeps trying to like, this time I can get it right. This time if I play God and I'll get it right. And it continuously comes back to him. Whereas this one, it sort of gets out from under him, and he actually tries to reject it, whereas things are already set in motion.
Well, and I think it kind of leaves it open to interpretation too. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I think it like goes dark and we like hear a knife and him scream, but like we don't actually see him getting killed. Yeah. Right. So he could be alive, could be dead. I mean, we really don't know. This is definitely a much more definitive ending, right? We see that everybody's been turned at this point, except for baby Gage, who's in the car. So I mean, that's definitely a big deviation. Also, too, in the first movie, it was the little boy that died, right? Not the girl.
Right. Yeah, that was the first change. Yeah.
And so, that is another departure. And I really, really like the way this movie set that up, just to kind of return to that here for a second, because, we see the girl in the road with her cat that she is just so, attached to, right? And then we see baby Gage run out into the road. And my first thought is, oh, nice. They set up this tension with the girl, making us, oh, the girl's going to die now, and I'm waiting for it, And then the little boy runs out in the road. And I'm like, well, wait a second. Are they going to kill the little boy then? Maybe they're not subverting my expectation. And then somehow they managed to kill the girl without having me be mad that they tried to misdirect us about it. When usually that shit bugs the crap out of me. So I really like how they sort of pulled that off. And great special effects with the truck, by the way. That could have looked way more poorly CGI than it did. I thought they did a good job there.
Yeah, it gave me some serious. What was that Stephen King movie? Not Stephen King. Steven Spielberg movie, that early one with the truck, the demon truck. Oh God, what was the name of that movie? I can't remember the name of it. But,
was Maximum Overdrive? Am I thinking
Maximum Overdrive? I think.
Yeah.
Was that it?
Was that Spielberg though?
No, it was.
Are you talking about the one with like the Green Goblin face?
No,
I can't remember. King directed. Oh,
Duel.
Yeah. You're thinking Duel.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Gave me some serious Duel vibes whenever that truck would appear. It's almost like, I don't remember. Did they show the driver in this movie at all? They may have.
Because we saw him fiddling with his phone.
Oh, yeah. But
don't fucking use your phone and drive, people. You could kill children that will get reanimated and go on to kill their parents.
That's right. Will, you had mentioned the Victor Pascal character.
Yes.
Early on in the movie, something happens to this guy. I think he got hit by a car, but I'm not sure, and he dies.
It's like a hit and run or something like
and
that.
And he's not part of the whole Pet Cemetery thing, but he's a ghost, I guess, in the mind of the dad, because the dad couldn't save him. The dad wanted to save him, and he couldn't. So he becomes this nemesis kind of ghost that's always kind of in his head. And that was a little bit ambiguous, like maybe a little confusing, because you had people coming back from the dead, but then you had this guy who was dead and he was appearing, but he didn't come back from the dead. So it was, he was just a regular ghost, I guess, or a presence, whereas the other people were actually like the undead who came back, right?
And by the way, he looked fucking disgusting. That made it really hard for me to eat my gummy bears looking at his brains. But
I mean, you did anyways, right?
I mean, I did. Let's be real. But he wasn't the only one, right? We had Rachel's sister coming back, right? Like we could hear her.
That's true. Yeah,
he wasn't haunted. The only one. Yeah,
she was haunted by guilt, and and that whole thing. That was a little overdone for me. They played up the footsteps on the ceiling, kind of creepy. There'd be kind of a dragging and thumping on the ceiling. They kind of overplayed that probably 5 or 6 times, and it was a little bit too much. But but other than that, I mean, Will, you said you had an issue with the Victor character. Was that like?
Well, yeah, I think that, and honestly, it's the same issue that I have with the sister character, and that like the intent for both is to show that these are characters who are overcome by grief, because the theme of this story is grief is overwhelming. Grief is death, and like the unknown of what happens on the other side of it is so overwhelming. But it's a natural part of life, and so we need to let that exist as it is, because when we meddle with it, it's unnatural, yada, yada, yada. I didn't see enough for me of the doctor blaming himself and just being overwhelmed by like not being able to save this kid to make that whole subplot even play off. As it was just a random creepy ghost who showed up and did random creepy things, but was kind of good, and that was it. And that wasn't enough for me. And same thing with the sister. I think the sister was more effective, because we actually had some pretty compelling lines where the wife says lines like, I could have stopped it. I should have gone upstairs. If I had just taken the tray, I would have saved
I
this.
Killed her, but I didn't. But I really did.
And
I
so
wanted her dead.
She goes through like the whole denial, anger, fear. Like she goes through all the different stages of grief in just how she copes with her sister's death through the movie. So that was more effective. I think that I don't know, it didn't 100% land, but it was way better than the Victor stuff.
Agreed. Hey, fun little Easter egg. Bruce from Cinematics in the chat says that he thinks the truck driver's phone was playing the tune/ringtone of the Ramones song from the original movie. I'd have to go back and check that, but that sounds accurate.
Well, there was a Ramones song in the end credits. There was a Ramones song in the end credits.
Sort of.
Well, it was a remake of a Ramones.
It was a terrible cover of that song. It was. So there's this thing in modern
I don't know what song it was, but yeah.
It's called Pet Sematary.
I don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery.
I don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery. Yeah. And so there's this thing in modern horror that sometimes bugs me, where at the end of like a creepy or terrifying moment, then or whatever it is, then it goes to the credits. It then goes into some sort of like upbeat kind of like, wow, didn't we have a lot of fun, guys? Type song. And that's what this cover was. Like we end on this moment, like the family all coming towards the car, and what's the kid gonna do? And then it goes to black, and then you hear that click, and it's just like, oh God, ghastly, what happened? And then you get this like stupid pop punk cover of this song. Like it totally robbed like any like final like dread that I may have felt. It pushed the release valve, and I didn't want the release valve pressed.
Right. As I think that was a really good ending scene. And you're right, Will. I think the atonalness of the song kind of robbed that moment of its impact a little bit. I really liked seeing them coming out of the woods to the car and a boy. I also liked the way they set it up at the beginning. The first shot of the movie, right, is the aftermath of what happens, right? If you remember, there's a scene, the car's there, the doors open, there's bloody trail from the house to the car, and I like the way that was set up, because then now you're wondering, like, holy shit, what the hell just happened? Like, who dies and who, I thought it was pretty well done the way they set that up.
I'm just so glad they didn't do the whole fucking cliched, like, 72 hours prior and then, fade away. Yeah.
Right.
That would have been dumb. But well, guys.
Now, I can't decide if my Halloween costume is going to be a red jumpsuit and gold scissors or a creepy animal mask.
You know what mine's going to be?
Yeah, what's that?
I mean, of the two movies that you just described, like,
well, it isn't going to be going by. It isn't going to be going by movie quality. It's going to be going by which I think is creepier. And I actually think the animal masks in this movie were pretty creepy.
They were, but I think they'll also be like. I feel like, from a very practical standpoint, I feel like if I wore that costume, I feel like I'd have to spend a lot of time explaining it.
who you were.
Like, oh yeah, right. I'm the creepy kids that walk through the woods in Pet Sematary. Whereas if you show up in the red jumpsuit with the scissors, even people that didn't see the movie are going to be like, oh yeah, that's like the Get Out guys movie, right?
No, they're going to be like, oh, another one of you. Okay, come on in.
Yeah, or they'll say like,
going to be it exactly.
Maiden too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Indeed. Well, I think it may be time to wrap this mofo up. I have a cat on my desk who's letting me know that it is officially time to go downstairs and, begin the rest of our evening. Oh, really? Come on. Anyway, well, why don't we do this? We'll go ahead and wrap things up here. It's been a fun discussion as always. But if people want to continue talking about movies with us, why don't we tell people where they can find us? Jim, how can folks interact with you online?
They can interact with me by following me on Twitter at JJPOUTWEST. That's JJP out west. That's me. And I'm also on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Excellent. And Will, how about for you?
Hey, you can find me on Twitter. Follow me at whatever code. I'm also on Facebook. Just look for William Lindis and send me a message so I know who you are. I also log everything that I see, and I do mean everything, on Letterboxd. So just look for William Lindis there. Connect. Let's talk movies.
All right, excellent. And you can find me on Twitter at iBradPro, or on Facebook, just search for Brad Harrison, the one that probably has Bear Chub Chaser friends in common with you. Again, send a message so I know you're not a spam bot or something. Big Tom in the chat says, by the way, for Halloween, I want to be a gummy bear that gets eaten by Brad. Well, I mean, I guess I bite if you ask me to.
That sounds like a horror movie in its own. Human-sized gummy bears. And Brad has forced to sit there and eat one.
Oh my gosh.
What
is going to a weird place.
Yeah, did this become like a Vorcast or something like that? Like, what the fuck
Tom,
are we on?
Tom, how about you be a giant gummy bear that I just lick a lot? Would that
might be better? Might be better.
I think that could potentially work a little bit better. But just want to say, I think we broke Will.
Once an episode.
Just want to give a shout out to everyone who joined us in the live chat this week. Great having you with us. Thanks so much for joining us on this journey that was Shazam and Pet Sematary. We'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.